Welcome back, grade 5s. This is Unit 8, Lesson 4. We're talking about rotation, but first let's review the other transformations we can do with our shapes. So the first transformation we learned was translation, and that is when we moved a shape as if we were putting our finger on it and dragging it somewhere else on the page. So if I move my arrow over to here, or anywhere really, if I move my arrow over here, that's a translation, and we mark that with our translation arrow. Okay, it's kind of funny that I'm using arrows for this, but you're going to pick any point, any corner or vertices on your shape, and you're going to draw your arrow to that same point on the new shape, like this, and that was to show how far we moved our shape. Okay, so you have to measure from the same point to the same point, and then you can measure distance. That's the translation. The second thing we learned about was reflections. So if we have this arrow, we can reflect it across our line of reflection, which was we use this purple dotted line for, and it acts just like a mirror. If I put this mirror or this line of reflection right next to my shape, it's going to reflect it backwards and create kind of the opposite image so that every point you pick on the original shape is equally far from the mirror as the point on the reflected image. We also saw that we could move our mirror. It doesn't have to be touching the shape. We can move it further away. It's just going to make the reflection further away as well. So that was reflection, review number 2. And the third thing is rotation. And this is the final transformation we're going to learn. We can rotate our shape along a point. So the first thing we need to do is pick any point on this shape. Actually, we'll see in a little bit, it doesn't even have to be on the shape. But let's start on the shape because it makes it a little easier. I'm going to pick the nose of the arrow again, and I'm going to rotate this arrow along our point. So what it's going to look like is if you were to actually build an arrow, like if you were to cut it out of paper and put your finger right on the point and then move the arrow around that point, that would be rotating, right? I have a rotation tool on here, but on the program I'm using, it only rotates around the very center of the object. So as if you were to put the point right in the middle of the arrow, or if you were to put your finger right in the middle of the arrow and rotate it around, that's the only way the tool works. So it's going to look, I'm going to have to work a little bit harder to try and rotate this properly. But if we put the point right on the tip of the arrow here, I'm going to create a second arrow to show what the rotated one's going to look like. If we rotate it this 1/4 turn, it's going to look kind of like this. Notice the arrows kind of stick together there. I might have to put on a black outline just so we can kind of see here the arrow a little bit better. There you go. So I've rotated a 1/4 turn. You'll notice that in your math work. They measure it in 1/4 turns, half turns, 3/4 turns, or full turns. So if I were to spin this arrow a full turn, a full 100 or 360 degrees, what it would do is it would go to this position that I just put this one in, straight up and down, and then it would go here, that's halfway around the circle, and then 3/4 of the way around the circle would be down here, and then a full spin, a full turn, would put it back exactly where it started. Okay, so there's the 1/4 turn, the half turn, the 3/4 turn, or the full turn, and those are kind of your fractions that you're going to see. It's going to rotate it either 1/4 of the way, halfway, 3/4 of the way, or the full way around. So that's something you need to know. Let's see here. If I rotate it in every one of those directions, so if I were to do a half turn, a 1/4 turn, and here's my 3/4 turn, all around that same point, which kind of got covered up, it's in the center there. Let's see if I can fix that. There you go, bring it to the front. Then we have this shape, which actually kind of created a cool looking cross, which is cool. But I've rotated 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and a full turn back to the original with my arrow. Okay, now I told you earlier that you don't have to always pick the same point. You can rotate anywhere. What would happen if I put my rotation point right here? What would it look like? Well, again, just imagine you putting your finger right on that part of the shape and moving everything else around. If we're going to do a 1/4 turn, so the arrow is going to be facing down now, that same part of the shape needs to be touching the point. So I guess that's another way to think of it, is if you recreate the shape, like if you redraw it, turn it a 1/4, right now I have my right point of the arrow, my right side of the arrow touching the point. I need to use that same part to touch the point again, and it's going to look like that. Again, if I rotated a half turn, it's going to look like this, still touching there, and then a 3/4 turn, the arrow is going to be facing up. It's going to be touching like that. And if I did the full turn, full 360 degrees, it's going to go back to where it started. Okay? But I forgot to keep this one here. Okay, another kind of cool pattern. So if you do all 3 turns, it kind of creates a cool pattern. Now you might be thinking, can I only rotate it a quarter, a half, or 3/4? Well, no, you could rotate it in other ways too. So if you wanted to, you could do a rotation like this, right? So that's still been rotated, but I don't know just from looking at it how much you've rotated it. Whereas it's really easy to see when you rotated a full quarter turn. You can see that because the arrow was horizontal and now it's vertical, you rotated a full quarter turn. And you can see that, yeah, that's 9 degrees or 1/4. However, when you just rotate it a random amount, it's hard to measure. But you can, that's still a rotation. Okay, the last thing I was going to talk about, I was tempted to put in another video, but I think I'll just do it in the same one, is sometimes the rotation point, this yellow dot, isn't on the shape. And that does make it a little bit trickier. Let's say that I put the rotation point right here. I'm going to get rid of our title here. How would I rotate this arrow around this point? Well, there's 2 ways to do it. Some of you might be able to see, just in your mind's eye, that, oops. Some of you might be able to see that a quarter turn, we know that it's going to be facing down. It should be right here. And the way that maybe you could visualize that is the point of our arrow was 2 spaces away from our point of rotation. And now it's still 2 spaces away. And so if we, oops, if we rotate it again for our half turn, we'd be over here. And then for our full turn, we would be down here. Okay, so some of you might be able to just see that, visualize that. Another way to do it that might be a little bit easier, especially if you're drawing in your books, is you can connect your shape to your point of rotation. And what I mean by that is, to get rid of this, I'm going to draw a line going from my point of rotation to my shape. That's a very thin line. Let me fix that 1 second. Like so. So now my shape is not just an arrow, it's an arrow with a line attached to it. And now I can visualize, at least this helps me, putting my finger right on the point of rotation and rotating this whole shape, the arrow and the line, upwards. Okay? And so maybe that's easier for you. I'm going to just rotate now. It's actually harder to do on the program here, but I feel like it does make it look like it's more connected, because now I'm not having a point of rotation that's off of my shape, it's actually still on the shape. So now I've rotated, and the last thing you would do is you could just get rid of this line. And you end up with the same thing, you end up with an arrow that's been rotated about this point that's not even attached to the arrow. Okay? So hopefully that all made sense. That's rotation, and it's the last two lessons in your math book, lessons 4 and 5, are both about rotation. You should be able to complete them both now, so give those a try. Good luck, and after you're done that, you are done the grade 5 math, so look forward to some bonus content after this. Bye for now, grade 5s.